What's going on, Z Community Cuties? It's your boy Azizz Finance, and welcome back to the Personal Finance in Canada show, also known as the PFC show. Whether you've been listening to our podcast for a while now, or this is your first time, be sure that you're either following or subscribe to the pod, and share this with somebody who you think will also get value from this podcast as well. Now, without further ado, let's get this party started and dive into the episode. By listening to the PFC show, the Personal Finance in Canada show with Azizz Finance, you acknowledge and agree that me, Azizz Finance, assume no responsibility for any financial decision or decisions that you make, as it is ultimately your finances and you are the only controller of your own decisions. I am a random person on the internet and not a financial professional, so please consult with one being a financial professional before making any financial-based decision, because anything that you hear on this podcast, overall, each and every single episode, is just a sharing of my experience and are not suggestions whatsoever, regardless of the types of language or words that I use within these episodes. Again, by listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that I assume no responsibility for any decisions that you make regarding your finances. So in this episode, we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the actual causes of inflation. For those of you who want to learn more about what's kind of going on behind the scenes for the causes of inflation. Now, there are three main types of factors that influence what inflation rates will look like: demand pull inflation, cost pull inflation, and built-in inflation. To understand all three, again, you must have a good understanding of the concept of supply and demand. Supply is how readily available something is, whereas demand is the amount of need there is for that certain something. The more of a certain thing that there is, the lesser of a need that there is, and vice versa. Now, the first factor that pulls into the overall inflation is demand pull inflation. Now, with this factor, inflation is caused by an increase in demand for a certain something, but the ability to make that certain something isn't able to keep up anymore. A perfect example of demand pull inflation, even though it was for a short period of time, was during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, where people flooded grocery stores, essentially clearing all of the shelves of everything and anything that you could think of. But for the sake of this example, let's just say toilet paper. So you're at the grocery store trying to stock up on your rolls of toilet paper, but then you've realized that people have cleared all the shelves. The dilemma here is you gotta do what you gotta do, so what the hell? Now, the grocery store is obviously aware of this, so they need to restock by contacting the manufacturer to send them a new batch of rolls. This is going to be an unexpected ask because the manufacturer and the store itself probably have a specific amount that they need to send, say every 3 months, but they're now realizing that they need to send stock at least once a month or once every, say, 6 weeks. So this is going to ramp up production and production costs. Another thing to consider is that it's not only this grocery store who's been asking for an unexpected restock, right? Every single grocery store you went to had its toilet papers cleaned out. So because of this, it causes a chain reaction for the manufacturer, which means chances are they won't be able to meet up with the demand. So in turn, they're going to have to increase the cost of the toilet paper rolls, and obviously the increased cost from the manufacturer isn't going to be matched at the grocery store, so that's why they'll end up increasing the prices for when you go to buy in your toilet paper. If this increase, for example, was 10%, then you're going to have to pay 10% more for each roll of toilet paper. This obviously doesn't mean that inflation for the year is going to be 10%, as there are the other two factors that we'll discuss, along with other products that are needed across the entire economy, because toilet paper is not the only thing driving it, right? Now, the next factor that actually influences overall inflation is something known as cost push inflation. Now, this is usually caused by an increase in the overall things that are required to produce a specific product. Say, for instance, we're talking about a junior chicken from McDonald's. So once you've decided that you want to fix up your financial situation, things can get a little bit confusing because you start asking yourself, okay, where do I start? Should I pay off debt first? Should I start investing, savings? And when it comes down to where to start, things aren't as clear as they should be. And this is exactly why we've written a free ebook called The Financial Blueprint for Canadians. It's actually on our website right now, so check it out. azizzfinance.ca, AZIZZ finance.ca, and usually it's the first thing that should pop up. Download it. It's literally 20 pages long, but it should give you a good idea of where to start within fixing your financial situation. Let me know what you guys think. I would love to hear your feedback, and give me a shout if you have any questions. Alright, now back to the episode. Now, there's a few things that come into play that get you that delicious sandwich that you very much enjoy. There's the bread, the lettuce, the chicken,
the mayonnaise, and that could even be broken down even further to eggs, salt, etc., along with the transportation costs that are required to bring these materials over to every single McDonald's location that you can think of. But for simplicity's sake, let's just say that the cost of gasoline increased. Crude oil, which is a precursor to the fuel that we use for our vehicles, increased in price by about 150% from early 2020 to late 2021. Now, considering this, the price that it costs McDonald's to transport its ingredients for a junior chicken has heavily increased as well. So it's going to increase the overall price of a junior chicken. Again, it doesn't mean that inflation for that year is going to be increased by whatever crude oil was, but we are going to see a much higher inflation since the majority of our economy is actually run off crude oil. Mainly it's for transportation, whether that be planes, trucks, cars, to bring products from point A to point B and back. But nonetheless, it is something to actually consider when it comes down to the overall inflation rate. And last but not least, the final factor that actually influences our overall inflation rate is built-in inflation. Now, this factor of inflation kind of relies on demand pull and cost push inflation prices, which we just talked about. Now, as prices increase across the board, this increases the cost of living for each and every single one of us. And because many of us rely on our jobs as primary sources of income, we need our salaries or we need our wages to match up so that we could still live the same way that we do. Now, companies consider our wages or salaries to be a cost of goods as well, believe it or not, because we are an integral part to the company's profits. The input directly measures up to the output, which in this case would be revenue or the company's profits. So if we're lucky enough to have our employers increase our wages, this will likely manifest itself in increased sales price for the company's product, services, or whatever the case may be. Now, since this factor of overall inflation relies on the other two, that's really why it's called the built-in inflation. It's kind of like a 2-for-1 deal. Overall, the more of either type of inflation that we have, the more of an overall inflation rate that we'll end up seeing for the year. Alright, Z community, that's pretty much it for today's episode. Now again, if you did find value from this, be sure that you're either following or subscribed to the podcast so that you're up to date with new episodes that are going to come your way. On top of that, if you feel like either your friend, your parents, your grandma, your grandpa are going to benefit from this episode or this overall pod, be sure you swing it their way, because at the end of the day, it could just be a nice little early Christmas gift or something. But nonetheless, guys, it's your boy Azizz Finance signing out. I'll see you guys on the next one.